Hello everyone, my name is Elizabeth, and I'm passionate about being a culinary expert. Cooking has been a significant part of my life since childhood, greatly influenced by my mother, who was an exceptional cook. Her encouragement sparked my early love for cooking, which naturally led me to culinary school. While I'm not one to boast, I do have a knack for creating delicious dishes. I previously worked at a well-known restaurant in Brooklyn, which is where I met my husband, Scott. He was dining with colleagues and was so impressed with the meal that he requested to meet the culinary expert, and the rest, as they say, is history. I haven't worked for celebrity culinary experts, but I pride myself on making food that genuinely pleases. My mother-in-law, Sandra, initially doubted my culinary skills. Despite not having formal culinary training, Sandra is an accomplished pastry chef in her hometown and worked at a local restaurant. Her baking is quite celebrated locally. The first time we met, Sandra somewhat skeptically inquired about my role in the culinary world, wondering if I was merely a salad preparer. I explained that I was the head culinary expert at a renowned restaurant and that preparing salads was just one of the many tasks I oversaw. Sandra hinted that she didn't need any pretense, reminding me of her reputation as a skilled pastry chef and cook beloved by her community. I responded enthusiastically, suggesting that we embark on a culinary journey together, hoping to collaborate on some exciting dishes. However, Sandra hesitated, pointing out the difference in our experience levels. She feared that her advanced techniques might be too complex for me to grasp. Undeterred, I expressed my eagerness to learn from her. Having been formally trained, I was confident in my ability to pick up new skills and was excited about the potential to learn from such an experienced pastry chef. I believe that cooking together could be a wonderful way for us to grow and share our love of food. Then Sandra said, with a hint of disdain, "Oh, please, I won't waste my time on just anyone who claims to be a head culinary expert. I'm far too busy with my work to offer private lessons. Perhaps when you're as experienced as I am, you might reach my level, or perhaps not." She laughed as she spoke, exuding a strong sense of pride that made me uncomfortable. Despite my initial desire to respect her experience, her dismissive attitude became increasingly hard to tolerate. She seemed convinced that I was inferior, a notion that stung deeply after years of working in the demanding culinary industry. As I strove to remain composed, her taunts began to wear me down, especially after Scott and I married. Her jibes at my cooking skills became more frequent and harsher, sometimes even belittling me in front of our guests. Even Scott, who was usually so supportive, grew weary of her condescending and arrogant demeanor. He often defended me, affirming my abilities as a culinary expert, but his mother remained unyielding in her skepticism. The tension escalated during a visit to Sandra's town. We stayed at her home for 2 weeks, during which I hoped to connect with the place where Scott grew up. About 5 days into our visit, Sandra threw down a gauntlet. "My son sings praises of your cooking," she said, her voice tinged with offense. "It hurts to think he might regard it so highly, given his own mother's capabilities." "It's not like that, Mom," Scott interjected. "I love your cooking too, but it's unfair how you demean and criticize her, especially without ever having tasted her food." "Why don't we solve this issue then?" Sandra proposed. "Let's have a family dinner tomorrow, and Elizabeth can cook. I want to see for myself if she's as good as you say." I agreed, masking my reluctance with enthusiasm. "I'd love to cook a family dinner, Sandra. I've been waiting for you to try some of my dishes. I'll do my best to impress you." Truthfully, my interest wasn't in impressing Sandra. I knew her pride might prevent her from ever truly appreciating my efforts. Nonetheless, I was ready to put my skills to the test, hoping to maybe, just maybe, change her mind. Eager to prove my culinary skills, I agreed to prepare a special dinner for the following day. completely unaware that Sandra had proposed this idea intending to embarrass me. I discovered her motives the next day under quite shocking circumstances. While I was in my room waiting for the dinner to cook, I received a text from Sandra, who was just in the next room. Curious, I opened it to find a video of her adding an excessive amount of salt to my dish. She followed the video with a message. "Now let's see if Scott still thinks you're better than me. After today, he'll never praise your cooking again." Stunned by her actions, I couldn't help but respond. "Wow, Sandra, you've ruined the meal I worked so hard on, and then you send me this video to mock me? How can you have no shame? I spent hours preparing it." Unmoved, she retorted, "I don't care, Miss Wannabe Head Culinary Expert. You're just a little girl who thinks she's better than me. Today we'll see who wins. You're acting very unethically, Sandra. This isn't how someone wins or loses. This was never meant to be a competition. You sabotaged my food." "Whatever, Elizabeth. You don't have enough time to make a new meal now. Scott will be home within an hour. It'll be so fun to see you get humiliated in front of him." Her words filled me with anger and disbelief at her cruelty. She mocked me even after sabotaging my hard work. I wanted to break down and cry, but I composed myself, refusing to let her see my distress. I immediately called Scott, needing to reveal the truth urgently. "Scott, we need to talk about something important," I said. "Sure, what's the matter, Elizabeth?" he replied. "Scott, I don't know how to say this, but your mom has tried to sabotage my cooking," I confessed. "Are you sure about this, Elizabeth? It's highly unlikely that Mom would do something like that," he questioned. "She sent me a video of her adding too much salt to my dish. I left the food in the oven and went to our room for my phone," I explained, hoping he would understand the gravity of the situation. As I scrolled through the messages, I found the video Sandra had sent to sabotage my dish. I immediately showed it to Scott, insisting, "If you don't believe me, just watch this." Initially, Scott was in denial, unable to accept that his mother could engage in such underhanded behavior. But once he saw the video, his disbelief turned to shock. He had read plenty of stories about difficult mothers-in-law, but never imagined his mother would embody one of those tales. Witnessing the evidence firsthand, he was incensed. We discussed the situation at length, and Scott was adamant that his mother needed to learn a lesson from this. After some thought, he said with a determined look, "You know what, Elizabeth? I'm going to invite someone special for dinner. Let's see if my mom can impress someone truly significant with her altered recipe." Curious and intrigued, I replied, "What do you have in mind, Scott? You look like you've hatched a brilliant plan." "I'll tell you later who I've invited," he teased, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Trust me, it's going to be memorable. After today, I'm not sure I'd want my mom involved in our lives much, but that alone won't be enough for her. She needs a real wake-up call. Altering someone's food isn't just wrong, it's an offense. Today, it's too much salt. Tomorrow, who knows? We need to address this behavior immediately so she realizes the magnitude of her mistake." I appreciated Scott's resolve. "I'm relieved to hear you say that," I admitted. "Honestly, I've been hoping we might distance ourselves from Sandra after this. Knowing you feel the same brings me immense relief." Scott laid out his plan, which was both clever and fitting. It was clear he thought Sandra deserved a dose of her own medicine, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation at the thought of her reaction upon realizing her misstep. I wholeheartedly approved of the plan, and Scott proceeded to call his special guest. We decided not to tell Sandra immediately. The element of surprise would make the reveal all the more impactful. After 3 hours, the meal was ready. Our meal, I should say. Because despite her intentions, Sandra's involvement was indeed indispensable. The stage was set for an evening that promised to be as enlightening as it was dramatic. I had to exert a lot of effort to keep my composure and not burst into laughter, all while making sure Sandra didn't catch on to my amusement Despite the excessive salt Sandra had sneakily added, the dinner looked quite appetizing, a testament to my culinary skills. Both Sandra and I were looking forward to the dinner, albeit for very different reasons. We proceeded to the dining area to finalize the preparations. Scott was already home, busy setting up the table. Sandra seemed puzzled to see an extra chair and questioned him. "Scott, you seem to have miscounted. There are only 3 of us. Why is there an extra chair?" "Oh, I forgot to mention, Mom, I invited someone over today," Scott responded calmly. "Elizabeth has put so much effort into this meal. I thought it would be great to have some professional judgment on it." Sandra's curiosity piqued. "Oh, and who might that be? Do I know this person?" "Yes, Mom, you know her quite well. It's my friend Laura," Scott revealed. "Since she's your boss and has a great palate, I figured she'd be the perfect guest to invite." Sandra's expression shifted rapidly from curious to alarmed, a change so abrupt I almost lost my composure right there. Scott, maintaining a straight face, feigned concern. "Is everything okay, Mom?" It was clear he relished the clever twist he had added. Laura was a good friend of ours, and originally Scott's friend, but we had quickly bonded over our shared love for food. By a stroke of fate, Laura also happened to be Sandra's boss, as she managed the restaurant where Sandra worked as a pastry chef. Laura was in on the plan and had eagerly agreed to join us for dinner. Before Sandra could recover from her shock, Laura walked in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Hey guys, thank you so much for inviting me. I was getting a bit bored at home since my husband was away on business. I'm looking forward to tasting what Elizabeth has prepared." She greeted us cheerfully. "Thanks for coming, Laura. We're thrilled to have you here," I replied while subtly glancing at Sandra. "I just sprung this invitation on you and Mom. Mom, I hope you don't feel uncomfortable. Laura is practically family after all." Sandra, a bit flustered, managed a response. "Oh, it's not a problem at all. I'm happy my boss can taste what my culinary expert daughter-in-law has cooked. Thank you for coming, Laura." As she mumbled these words, Sandra avoided making eye contact with Laura, who smiled innocently and took her seat at the table, remarking on how wonderful the food looked. The tension was palpable, but the stage was set for an unforgettable evening. I graciously rose from my seat and began serving the meal to everyone at the table. I made sure to give Sandra a particularly generous portion, since she had been so eager to critique my cooking. However, as soon as everyone tasted the food, their reactions were immediate and telling. They spat it out. I too tasted it and was dismayed by the overwhelming saltiness. It was genuinely unpleasant. Sandra, who couldn't hide her reaction, began coughing from the intense flavor, and in her distress confronted me angrily. "Oh my God, Elizabeth, this is horrible. Why did you put so much salt in it? You're a terrible cook. I was right all along. Going to culinary school doesn't guarantee you're a good cook. I'm so embarrassed that Laura had to taste this," she exclaimed. Laura, ever the diplomat, interjected with a thoughtful observation. "This is quite bad, but it's highly unlikely that this much salt was added by mistake. A professional would know." "Yes, Laura, this can't be an accident. A professional always knows their measurements," I supported her statement, emphasizing the impossibility of such a mishap. Caught off guard, Sandra looked like a deer in headlights, fearing that her scheme was unraveling. Attempting to maintain her composure, she tried to shift the blame onto me. "Oh God, Elizabeth, did you intentionally add too much salt knowing Laura was coming? I understand you have no respect for me, but you should have considered our guest." I stood firm against her accusations. "You're wrong, Sandra. I didn't put too much salt in the dish, you did. Don't act so surprised or offended. We know you tampered with the meal." "How dare you accuse me of such a thing? I'm just a poor old lady who wanted to see how good you can cook. You're just jealous and making false accusations. I bet you don't even know how to cook properly. Who knows if you really went to culinary school?" "I'm not lying, Sandra, and we both know that very well. You added salt to my food to sabotage it, I retorted, confident in the truth. Turning to her son in a plea for support, she cried out, "Scott, look at what your wife is saying. I'm sure she did it herself to make me look bad. Why aren't you saying anything?" Scott, having witnessed the unfolding events and knowing the truth, chose his words carefully, supporting the undeniable evidence rather than the heated accusations. As the tension at the dinner table heightened, Scott, holding his phone, turned to Laura and said, "I have the proof right here, Mom. Elizabeth recorded it on her phone. Laura, would you like to see the video?" Laura nodded, clearly keen on understanding the full extent of the situation. When Sandra realized her underhanded tactics were about to be publicly revealed, panic set in, her face filled with fear, and she swallowed hard as Scott played the video for Laura. Laura watched intently, then turned to Sandra with a stern look. "Sandra, what is the meaning of this? You intentionally sabotaged Elizabeth's cooking out of jealousy," she accused. "It's not what it looks like, Laura. I was just joking around with her. It was supposed to be a friendly competition," Sandra tried to explain, attempting to downplay her actions. "I don't care about the reason," Laura responded firmly. "You know very well that this kind of behavior is completely unacceptable in our industry. Sabotaging someone's cooking is a serious offense." "No, Laura, I would never behave this way at the restaurant. I was just a little jealous of Elizabeth because she has that fancy degree. I swear it would never impact your restaurant's reputation," Sandra pleaded. Laura shook her head, unconvinced. "The fact that you could do this to your daughter-in-law is appalling, Sandra. If you can get this jealous of Elizabeth, I can only imagine what you might do to your coworkers. I'm sorry, but I can't take that risk. I have to let you go." Sandra's pleas grew desperate as she began to cry, realizing the gravity of her situation. "Please, Laura, don't fire me. This won't happen again. I'm truly sorry," she begged. In our small town, job opportunities, especially in the culinary field, were scarce. The town had only one other dining establishment, a cafe, which was run by a skilled pastry chef, who was also the owner. Laura had initially given Sandra the job, more so because she was Scott's mother than because she was the best candidate. The town had plenty of other eager and capable pastry chefs who would gladly take her place. Aware of her precarious position, Sandra turned to Scott in a last-ditch effort. "Scott, please, talk to Laura. I can't lose my job over a small mistake. Help me, please." Scott, however, was resolute. "Why would I help you, Mom? Laura is right. Keeping you on staff is too risky. An employee who lacks ethics is a liability to any business." Sandra's actions had not only jeopardized her job, but also strained familial ties, proving that unethical behavior has far-reaching consequences. "I fully support Laura's decision, and you haven't even apologized to Elizabeth for what you did," Scott said sternly to his mother. "Okay, I will apologize to her right now," Sandra conceded, turning to me. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. Please forgive me." I shook my head, feeling the weight of her actions. "Absolutely not, Sandra. This wasn't a simple mistake. You meticulously planned this and acted with malice towards me. I suspect you wouldn't have even thought of apologizing if your job wasn't at stake. I can't just forgive something like that." Scott then turned decisively to his mother. "Mom, you've gone too far today. I don't feel comfortable having you around my wife anymore. We're leaving today." He then revealed that he had already packed our bags while the confrontation was unfolding. "We don't want any contact with you for now. We've given you too many chances." "Good decision," Laura chimed in, offering her support. "You two could stay with me while you find flights back home? It won't be a problem. I'll be happy to host you." Unlike Sandra here. Sandra's reaction was explosive. She began to yell and cry, lamenting about how we had ruined her life. In a single moment, she had lost both her job and her family's support. She became hysterical, but I chose not to repeat the things she said. They were truly appalling. Scott, Laura, and I left while Sandra was still sobbing on the floor, hurling accusations and insults. We went straight to Laura's restaurant to have a peaceful dinner. There, we discussed more than just the meal. Laura shared her plans to open a new restaurant in our hometown and wanted me to be part of it. Scott was also interested in investing in her new venture, and we quickly struck a promising business deal. Laura was not only a great friend, but a savvy businesswoman, and we had complete faith in her capabilities. The next day, Scott and I managed to get a flight back from the nearest city. Laura drove us to the airport and bid us farewell, promising that we would meet soon to finalize the plans for the new restaurant. Meanwhile, Sandra was relentless in her attempts to reach us, causing Laura to intervene and text her about the necessary steps to formally terminate her employment. We asked her not to contact us further and blocked her number. Later, we read the text she sent and saw she was becoming increasingly unhinged. As time passed, Laura followed through with her promise, finding a suitable replacement for Sandra at the restaurant. Despite the dramatic events, we were relieved to move forward with our new beginnings, leaving the chaos behind. After the incident, Sandra found herself without work and in dire need of money. Laura shared with us that Sandra had to take a job as a cleaner in a local grocery store as there were no other job opportunities available. While the news brought a brief, guilty chuckle from us, my feelings were mixed. I did feel a twinge of sympathy for her situation, but then I'd remember the harsh words she hurled at me, and any sympathy quickly faded. Meanwhile, Laura's new restaurant, which was jump-started with Scott's financial support, is thriving. I'm working there now and genuinely enjoying it. Laura makes regular visits to oversee operations and ensure everything meets her high standards. Over this time, our bond has grown stronger, and we've had countless fun moments together. As for Sandra, we've maintained our no-contact stance. We've decided to keep it that way until she demonstrates genuine change and progress in her attitude and behavior. This decision has allowed us to focus on the positive developments in our lives, nurturing our careers and relationships without the shadow of past conflicts.